It's like, here's the Big Bang. There's everything that ever existed in the universe. You can't destroy matter, right? It's all like, in tiny spots. Shush. Listen, I'm telling you what the Pinkologists think. Tiny little spot in the universe.
But we're Pinktologists.
I'm not a pink. Well, I suppose we are. We just
I thought we'd established
that we must be Pinktologists.
Yes, we must be.
But let's examine whether we really are before we commit to anything or sign any legal papers or something. Right? This is what the Pinktologists say.
I think once we've decided, then that's what we are.
Do you want to know what the Pinktologists actually believe before you've decided for sure? The Pinktologists...
It doesn't matter what they believe.
Here they are.
I know the way religion works. You accept what somebody says.
Shush.
Once you've decided what religion you are, you have to accept it blindly.
Let me get this out. Here they are. Right. This is what they believe. Shush. Here they are. Right. In the middle. Right. There's a tiny, tiny, tiny little dot. We call it the universe. Even though it's not yet. And it goes, and then it explodes exponentially, huge, and everything was still there in the beginning, right? No, and billions and trillions and willions and dillions, what was it that we said? Trillions, Googleplexes of years later, Googleplexes, it's a very big number. Is it like the biggest number ever? Can you have 2 Googleplexes? Wouldn't that be ridiculous?
Yeah, you could, but then it wouldn't
be the same. Then you have to have another name.
It would just be
2 Googleplexes
2 times Googleplex.
2 Googleplex. And 3 Googleplexes.
And 3 Googleplex.
Frugleplex.
And 4 Googleplex.
And Foogleplex.
Million Googleplex.
Alright, imagine a million Googleplexes.
A Googleplex.
A Moogleplex.
A
right?
Zoogleplex.
Moogleplexes of years later. Moogleplexes. Literally millions of millions of Trugleplexes. Trillions of Googleplexes.
Smoogleplex.
Yeah, that's how many there were. That many years later, the sun in this universe got this galaxy got made, right? And it went whoa, and it got really hot. And it's like, I'm so hot, I'm really hot. And then somehow, I don't know how, there were planets that were like formed. I know, because it was like gases, and it goes whirly, and then they turn into planets from being all whirly, and then the sun cools down a little bit, and like the furthest away, like it's not a planet anymore, Pluto we'll call it. Say it was a planet once, because it was slightly bigger, because it was hotter, because it wasn't so far. So that was the little planet that could. And here it was, and here's Pluto, quite happily being a planet at this point. I'm not having it said that it wasn't ever a planet. It was a planet. As far as it was concerned,
well, if
it's lovely,
it's a planet,
and it was
it's
warm.
a planet.
It was lovely and warm and lush, and it was so warm. It was really warm, and it was so warm. It was really warm, and it was all joined up with all the other planets because the sun was about here, and all the other planets were like forming. So they're going winky whirly whirl, swirly swirl. But the planet that started to form the life was the Pluto, and Pluto was like whoa. And on Pluto, these little amoeba-y type things, but they weren't amoebas because they were amoebas, like before amoebas. They sort of like, they were going wiggly, and they technically were everything else in the universe because then they, as the sun cooled, and then other planets formed, they were like, oh, this is getting cold. So they jumped, and they jumped, and they jumped, and they kept jumping, and they kept jumping, and then they jumped eventually to Earth, because then it was quite cold further out, and it was a little bit warm, a little bit tiny too warm further in, so they just stopped here, which is where they were for a little while. So then they were here after going through all the planets, not all of them, most of them, and then they landed here, and they had a nice time, but they were tiny, but they were the tiny little germ of everything that came. So it's like the bird, but there was only one sort, and he went wee, and so it's always been a rat, this, but it didn't look like a rat. The same as there's lots of, there's lots of different things on the earth, lots of different things. You think they're different things. It's like, for instance, I'll show you here, different things. Here's one thing, it's you, and here's another thing, that's aloe vera plant. You're actually the same thing. But this has always been an aloe vera plant, and you've always been you. Because essentially, at the very beginning, that's everything was, and this plant pot actually, this plastic, which was like made out of some shellfish from a Googleplex years ago. Probably not Googleplex years ago. Some years ago. this is also the same as this, which is also this soil, which was at one point some other sort of animal or plant or thing, is now soil. But this is essentially the same thing as this, which is essentially the same thing as this, which is essentially the same thing as this, and everything you're wearing, you are all of it. It's all the same thing. So, a rat has always been a rat, in the same way as you have always been you, always. Even though your parents aren't you, your parents are you, really. Because they are you, and you are they. And they are you, and we are all together, you see. And that's what happened, is you are a rat, the rat is a rat, the rat's always been a rat, you've always been a rat. Or you go back, 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 you go back. Right to the beginning, we're all rats. That's what it is. That's what the Pinkologists believe. Do you understand now?
That's just crazy talk.